Okay, so hopefully you're in the right place. We're going to talk about Snowflake. It's a SaaS offering, and hopefully you think it's kind of cool. I'll show you some things that I think is kind of cool with this. And if you've been here for 2 days, you know about the whole phone thing, and you've probably heard about passes, offerings, and all that kind of stuff, right? So my name is Reeves Smith. I'm out of Denver, Colorado. I've been doing database stuff for 20 years, exciting, 20 plus years. And for the first time in my life this year, I can call myself a certified snowflake. That's pretty awesome. I mean, other people have called me that in previous years, but now we know it's really true. So, and I've been working with Snowflake for the last little over a year, and I really thought it was pretty cool, and I kind of wanted to show everybody what I saw and maybe get your take on it. There will be one thing that I will not probably show, and as SQL people, let's see if you can figure out what it is at the end, and then we can have a quick talk on it. But if you don't see something that you're like, hey, I'm a SQL person, I'd like to talk about this, because there's one thing I'm not talking too much about. We'll see if you figure it out, and we'll give you my little 2 cents afterwards. Okay, you be quiet. Somebody's already read the back of the book. But when I do this, I always like to ask questions of who I'm kind of talking to. So let me ask the question of who's DBAs. I hope I got that right. Yep. DBAs, BI, what did I do next? Database developers, could be the same. You can vote twice. Data warehouse people, is that more of the crowd I'm looking at? Big data people, oh, okay. We'll see if we don't make you guys upset, but hey. Ever worked with the cloud? Is that kind of like a given nowadays? Nobody's like not doing that, so we know where we're at. Anybody worked with Snowflake that I'm gonna have to be careful about what I say if I'm not saying the right thing, right? Okay, that's not how that works. Dang it. Okay, so what we're gonna try to do here, I'm just gonna give you a quick introduction to Snowflake, talk about the architecture at a high level, right? And then we're just gonna start going through some demos, because that's where the cool stuff is. And if we get time at the end, we should. Depends on how long the demos go. We'll just talk about data replication. And it's a talk, not as much of a demo, but that's kind of what we're after. So hopefully that's, we're just going to do, I'm going to do a lot of demos. So I'm standing and moving around as much as I can right now, because I'll probably be sitting down, because this is a session I've done with the most amount of demos. So what is it? Every 2 or 3 demos there could be a problem. So we're going to really hope that everything goes well. It should, and I can show you some stuff that you'll find kind of interesting. Okay, any questions? Nobody's leaving yet, so we're in the right room. Okay, so let's start off with an introduction to Snowflake. If you haven't heard about it, or you've been under a rock or something, maybe, it was founded in 2012 by 2 gentlemen from Oracle. And you will see one of the remnants of that piece as I do some of the demos. But when it was first founded, in the first couple years, it was in what they call stealth mode, so they didn't really advertise it to anyone. They just had customers that they were working with, trying to get the product up and running. And from that, they launched for the first time in AWS in 2015, and then became available in 2018. So it just became available in Azure last year, and then it is announced that it should be available in GCP. So one of the things right there, it's the only SaaS offering that is not cloud specific. Try to do that with Redshift. You can run Redshift where? AWS. You can run, am I allowed to say Azure SQL Data Warehouse today? Even though it's not that anymore. So what, Synapse Analytics or something like that. So yeah, and that runs only in Azure, right? So this is the only data warehouse cloud offering that runs across clouds. And that can lead to some interesting things. It might be a big deal, it might not be a big deal, but the nice part about it is means what you do with Snowflake, you can do it on Azure, you can do it on AWS, you can do it on GCP, I assume. We'll have to see what happens with that. But so yeah, those first couple years, it was in stealth mode. And I think they really got the product down. I want to say they had quite a few customers still when they were in stealth mode. I thought it was 800 to 1,000 customers that were still. So it was no they were working with quite a few people. And one of their biggest customers on there is Capital One, so Capital One's actually running on Snowflake, so it's a pretty big deal. It was one of the only offerings, I think, from a database perspective, and I'll say that as my opinion, that was built ground up from the cloud, or ground up to be in the cloud, not technology that has been running on-prem and retrofitted to fit into the cloud. And that led them to some, I think, some big improvements, which is scalability, and paying for what you use is different than the other products, and I'll kind of show that as we talk through and talk about warehouses and stuff like that. You'll hear me use that term. Warehouses, when I say warehouses, that's basically compute. So that's their definition of a warehouse is that those are pieces of compute. So, and it's nice because it's pay for what you use, and you'll see with some of the warehouses where that comes into play. It's not something where you have to turn things on and leave them on. And it's, I don't think, as expensive because of that. So, and you can scale it out however you want. It currently in AWS and in Azure sits in in those two cloud providers sits in these regions. And there's more regions coming online, and I might not have that up to date. There might be more regions. But when I looked at that time, that's were some of the regions. So you can see that it's in the east, but it's not in, AWS has something in the west, but it doesn't have something in the west yet. But I think something in the west is coming up online in Azure here pretty quick, if I wasn't mistaken. So a little bit of the, I don't want to say marketing slide. The only thing I'm trying to say here is if you look at these items, if you use standard, you only have 1 day of time travel. Or does it say data retention? Yep, time travel. And if you look at enterprise, you can do multi-clusters. And then you can have up to 90 days of time travel. And that will become cool in just a bit. But that's what I'm calling out. If you want to look at any of that other stuff, the business critical is more, things are more keyed. You're able to key things that are in the database and keep the keys so that you can manage those. And then the VPC is you basically run your own version, and you're not sharing anything with anybody else. So that's kind of the difference from that standpoint. Okay? Now, when we talk about architecture, there's basically 3 different areas. There's 2 that you kind of deal with, and cloud services is the one that's provided for you. So they provide all the security, the management, the metadata management, and all that kind of stuff is provided for you. There's the query processing layer, which is where all your compute is going to run, and that's what you can manage by turning up compute. And then there's storage, and there's database storage. And I like to kind of change that a little bit and make this slide, because basically all the storage is a blob store of some sort from the provider that they're within. So if they're within Azure, they're basically running under blob storage that's in the Azure, but they're managing that piece of it. So you have access to it, but they manage it from that standpoint. And I think that's one of the game changers that really separates this solution from other solutions, is by being in blob storage. You've got to think, there's somebody out there with more cat videos than any database has ever grown to right now. So they are managing the fact that somebody's storing so much stuff that they're having to deal with that problem, that the databases have not yet, even large databases, but if you remember back in the NetWare days where we used to throw stuff on network shares, they just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the nice part is they've given that scale piece to the cloud provider to manage, and they don't have to manage that. And I kind of look at it as the same as when we were doing databases and we didn't have a SAN, and the SANs came out, and it's like, oh my gosh, now this is great. We can hook up to a SAN, and when we hook up to a SAN, we can get it so much larger. And that's, I think, the big difference that Snowflake went through, is they're like, hey, we're going to have a cloud SAN. And that cloud SAN is going to deal with the fact that, oh, we need 400 petabytes. That's not Snowflake's problem, because that problem is being invested by the cloud providers, and guaranteed they are highly motivated to make sure you can store that much whatever, right? So they're setting the boundaries before I think we ever get to them. So scale from a standpoint of size, I don't have the marketing stuff that they have some crazy amount, but I could have swore one time when I saw a demo, it was insane from a size standpoint. So let's just say it's really big. And not big data, it's really big. It's really big. So that's the nice piece, is you can think about, hey, if I'm on Snowflake, I'm not worried about size. One of the customers I'm currently at, that was one of our first questions that we kept asking is, are you concerned about size? And we were dumbfounded that everyone looked at us like we were crazy. And I mean, we're talking, we have some ingestion that happens at the table, 22 billion rows a day that's coming in. So you're talking large amounts of data, and they were not concerned at all. They have been working with the product for quite some time, but they were not. It was shocking to us to hear that kind of size and have people just not concerned at all. So I thought that was pretty cool. And here's, is it not working now? Come on. Or is it working? And I'm not seeing it working. There we go. Okay, sorry. So, and this goes back to that idea of storage and compute. And I kind of like to drill home the point of this solution actually separates storage from compute. And I don't mean I'm going to give you a bill for storage and I'm going to give you a bill for compute. Because when you tell me that, oh, if you want this size, you have to set to this compute level. Hold on. This size, this compute, that means there's a tie there. Snowflake says you can have whatever size you want. So when in normal ones, people will say, I want to scale up my database, but I try to make it stick right next to it because there's still this big connection of compute and storage are pretty tied together, even though they're billing you as two different things. With Snowflake, it's completely different. With the fact, and as you have extra users come in, they're going to use the same compute, right, in most situations. So they've kind of separated and done a little bit different. And the first thing they started with is, okay, again, it's in blob storage. They really separated it out, right? It's in blob storage and we have compute. They're totally different. So if another user comes on and wants to do things, you can scale up totally different compute, and you could even make it two multi-cluster compute to be able to talk to that data. And then what do we always have running always at night, right? You have your ETL job, right? But you don't have to do your ETL job at night anymore. You can do it during the day because you just spin up your own compute, and you're able to work with that same data. And I think that's pretty amazing from that standpoint. And then always the ETL job ends, right? It gets late, everybody goes home. And in other solutions, what do you have to do? You have to leave everything on or turn it off. So you turn it off at night, right? And then people come back in. Somebody like a Jason or something like that comes back in. We'll just say that name. Comes back in to work different hours than all the rest of us, right? And he tries to run his compute, or he tries to run a process, and what happens? Sorry. Okay, now over in Snowflake land, what happens? Compute just comes up. And of course, we made that a small compute because we don't care about him working late at night. I can make up certain computes that come up, so then he's able to run and get his queries. But then it's 4 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, he goes home. And what happens? Compute just starts to go away, and it scales back down. That piece right there I thought was a pretty, or I think is a pretty big deal. Because we can set levels of compute and have those levels of compute work with different people in different groups. And the nice part about that, again, separating storage and compute, what else can I do with compute? I can separate it by group. I can separate it by function. And by doing that, I don't have to have one group paying for everything and trying to figure out the bill. And here's the types of compute that we have, are the warehouse sizes that we have, and you can see the credits that it's associated with, and basing it on an example that's Azure East, I think is what I base it on, possibly. US East or something like that, and it's $3 an hour. And in doing that, you can see that you can run an extra small for $3 an hour, which is pretty cheap. And I will run an extra small to do everything that we're going to do in here. And I'll show you. Now, I have some queries that we ran 4XLs and super fast. I mean, and with ETL jobs, scaling up is way more important. If you're running jobs that are doing big queries and that kind of stuff, scaling up is better. If you're running multiple users that are hitting it, scaling out is also. And that's where, if you're not in an enterprise client, you can't scale out. You can only scale up. So those are some considerations to think. But here's the piece, just kind of some of the notes. It's billed at a second after a minute. So if you kick up a job and it runs for 65 seconds, you spin it back down immediately, you're going to pay 65 seconds. If you kick up a job for 10 seconds and then turn it down, you're still going to pay a minute. Because I'm assuming there's some overhead in turning it up and turning it down all the time. So the idea is that you can if you want, but there's that minute boundary. But after that minute boundary, you start paying at a per second basis, which is kind of cool. And here's kind of the credit usage. Azure East, that's what I did that off of. So you can kind of see in standard it's $2 an hour, and enterprise 3, and the other ones are up there too. Business critical, call them. That's a whole different conversation. And here's just kind of, can you see that? Or do I need to, am I able to zoom? Let's see. I'm in this presentation mode. I think I'm going to jump out of that. That's not my wave. Let's try to do this, make life easier. Because then I think I can zoom. Right now, I went back to that. Am I able to zoom? Is it zooming? No. What's that? Oh, am I not running Zoom it? You could be onto something. Please have Zoom. Oh, nice. We're going to not worry about it. Sorry. It's my one ding. Okay, so far. But hopefully you can see those numbers. Can you not see those numbers? I'll read them off. So you're talking, we did an aggregate over 82 billion rows down to 58 million rows with a time of 1 minute and 5 seconds, right? So 1 minute and 5 seconds. That was on a 4XL though. So was no joke. But I think on a 4XL, what's that costing me? I think it's like $6 or $7 an hour. So you're still talking, that was a $10 query. 6 a minute, yeah. 640, okay. I'm going to say 7 and call it good because we have a little bit of change. But is what I'm saying is, so you can do that kind of stuff, turn it down, so you have that level of performance. You don't have to use that level of performance because when I showed the screen, I guarantee everyone was looking, and the first thing they saw was, oh my gosh, a 4XL is 300 but you have that available, and you don't have to turn it on and leave it on, right? You have the ability to turn it on, let somebody use it, and turn it off, and then go back to other stuff. And I'll show you. I'll do all my stuff in a extra small, which is $3 an hour, so it's just not that much. So, okay, leads us to Snowflake administration. It's in the cloud now. You don't do any administration, right? I just want to throw this note out that there's a little different piece. You're not doing backup and restore, and you're not doing really the performance tuning, because there is one word I will not use in this. I guess I'll have to use it to say it, but I'll use it one time. You don't create what in Snowflake? Indexes. There you go. So that's the only time I will use that word in this. There's none of that. So that administration time is gone, right? The administration time of backup and restore. But there is one thing that you're going to need to do that I think a lot of people forget about, and that is understanding administration of costs, right? And monitoring and figuring out costs and getting, because you probably, if most organizations have put together a budget, and if you put together that budget, you want to stay around that budget. So we've done stuff where we monitor so that we can see what's going on, and we had some people using 4XLs a little more than they probably should, and was kind of hurting the budget from a standpoint. So you just got to monitor that cost. But the nice piece about it is, you can kind of see that those are different warehouses, right? And I can assign them, like I assigned a warehouse to Power BI. I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do some stuff with Power BI. I can see how much of that time went there. And as you can see, that was less than a credit. So it was less than $3. But let's assume that I can also set up warehouses based on departments. So that's kind of the cool thing, is I can create a warehouse, have that warehouse, create those warehouses and give it to a department and let them run off that, and I can then monitor the cost from what's going on from those warehouses. So now I'm cost control or cost monitoring is totally different than now this idea that you're just sharing a service and everyone's paying for part of it. You can have groups pay for the part that they're actually using from that standpoint. Questions? Uh-oh, here we go. Go ahead.
Can you, so say you've given various departments their own warehouses, can you restrict what size they can scale up to?
Oh, for sure. So when I create a one of the things that we do when I create a warehouse, if I'm creating a warehouse for a department, and I'm pretty sure I have it in a demo, but I'll talk to it real quick, is I create a warehouse for, let's say, your department, and I think in my demo I'll do accounting. I create a warehouse for accounting, but what I do is I do accounting, extra small, large, all the way. I can restrict who has access to be able to run those. I can restrict how long it goes from a standpoint of when it spins back down. So can I restrict specific users? Yes, I can. You probably want to do it at a group level. I mean, it's a management piece, and like I said with the administration, yes, you can do that stuff, but you will have to manage that. But yes, you can do that. Because we turned off the 4XL for some people that were abusing the privilege. So you just don't have to create the 4XL for them, right? I just create in some groups. And the piece that I didn't say, I can also create how much it'll scale out. So you create a 4XL that can scale out to 10, you can eat up some change real quick. That probably wouldn't be something I would let everyone just have. But it allows you to have that piece of it, okay?
You can see the budget on Reeves as well.
Oh, yeah. If you see this thing right here, you can see how each one of the warehouses is run and what the budget for each one of those warehouses. We'll just assume, the Power BI won't even show up. I don't think it showed up on this side, but not over there. And you're seeing that by the day in this chart. I can kind of show you that. You can click in on the day and you can see it. So you can see what that warehouse is and you can control it quite a bit. Any other?
Couple questions. So,
Uh-oh.
does it have AD integration?
Yes. I haven't set it up. But yes, I'm taking his advice.
Okay. The other question is, where do you restrict access to data objects? Is it at the warehouse level, or is it?
What do you mean by restrict?
Let's say we want a particular user to only have access to specific objects.
You'll see when I show the demo, it's like, it has an interface where you can see databases and tables, and you can restrict it at any level with that, and schemas and all that kind of stuff. So that piece of it's the same. And do remember that the two gentlemen that started this company came from Oracle. So the other piece that I really haven't dove into was it's heavily SQL based. I'm kind of the guy that, in this day and age, you hear of all the, PySpark and Python and R and oh my gosh. Snowflake's awesome. It's SQL and basically SQL from that standpoint. Yeah, well, no, it's SQL and it's more ANSI standard. It has 99% of the stuff that we're all used to from that standpoint, so it's really nice from that.
Based on the size of the t-shirt, they have assigned a warehouse size, I believe.
Right.
Access, large, and all that. So how many compute levels do we have in access and large? Whatever.
Compute levels? The easiest way I look at it, if I'm not mistaken, the number is the actual number of clusters. So you go as one, the number of compute, when it goes two, you have two, and it goes up. I look at it as, usually when I've scaled up for queries, I usually will see, at least if I've scaled up, which is a 2x, right? You can kind of think of it as a 2x. If you go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8, when you go up, everything usually comes down in half. And I can say I've seen that with almost 99%. There was one query, I don't know why it didn't do that. You will get to a limit where you hit it, and on ETL jobs, when you're doing things, you will see, I've seen over 2x most of the time. Because what it is it comes down to this idea that it has to spool out, temp stuff, and when it can spool it out locally within that cluster, it's fine, but when it has to spool it out off that cluster back into blob storage, it becomes more expensive. So when I start scaling up and I don't have to spool for big queries, there's easily a 2x difference. So when you really think about it, it's cheaper to run the larger warehouse. It finishes fast. Once it gets to a point of finishing within a minute, then it's not any cheaper, but when you're talking, like we've had queries that'll run for 10, 20 minutes, where I could scale it up and have it run, scale it up once, it'll run in 10. Scale it up twice, it'll run in 5. Seeing as the factor of cost is the same as my time decrease or greater, it's actually cheaper to run it in a bigger warehouse. So it does, from a dev standpoint, it does become I got to kind of think about it. I'm bad. I start with the smallest because I'm just a cheap guy. I start with the smallest, and then, okay, that ran. I'm like, why are you running at that level? You can kind of see, you can go look at the query plan and see where it's at and go, oh, okay, no, we're not waiting for that. Click, and I can go over and scale up to large and then run it from there.
Is it the same as other data warehouses when you scale up, there's an outage?
No. And I'm not stating the questions back, I'm sorry. Is it the same as other data warehouses when you scale up, there's an outage? No. I mean, because I can scale up, but I can also scale out to something else that has no effect of that current warehouse that we're at. So it's completely independent. Demo time? How am I doing on time? Okay. Any other questions? No? We're good? I got to sit down for this, right? I think I do. Okay. Now, do I have Zoom? I need to get Zoom running. Okay, you guys get to see my craziness. Where the heck did I put it? I thought I was supposed to be smart. Whoops. That will help, right? I think it's running. Is it running? Okay, sorry. Okay, here we go. So I've got tabs. I'm working in the Snowflake interface, right? I am currently signed on to a cluster that's enterprise, and I've got a couple tabs open, so I can probably give a little introduction there. You can access Snowflake from this UI, or you can access Snowflake from other tools. I've got a couple like DataGrip and dbeaver, which are two tools that you can access them. DataGrip being a paid-for tool, which I guess I'm not allowed to say, and then dbeaver being another tool that you can access and get at this information. So you have tabs. I'm going to kind of leave that as you have tabs of all your information. You can pull scripts in. You can save them. They save out in blob storage for you. So the first thing we had to do to ingest data in. So we're going to talk about ingesting data in. The first thing we're going to have to do is I'm going to create stages and where I put that. And that data needs to land in some kind of blob storage somewhere. So it can land in any of the services, and you could, if you wanted to, you could have something in Azure. You could have something in Azure or you could have it in AWS S3 and pull it in from Azure. So it doesn't matter. Wouldn't make any sense because there's a huge. I've seen, not huge, but it's fast when it's in the same data center. So, and it wouldn't make any sense not to, but all I'm saying is that's not a restriction of having it in the same data center. It just has to have access to it. So you have to create this idea of stages, and then use stage files, and then you create copy. A copy program will bring that data in. So we will go through and we'll do that. I created the stages beforehand because I was smart enough not to put my Azure token on there, because then I'd have to go figure out how to get rid of it and change it. So I've already created this stage. And you can put these stages in different locations. They're really just information on how to get back to that stage. I like to put it in a central database, and I'm putting it in an admin database. It doesn't have to sit in that database. You just have to give a full path to get at it. So if you're within a different database, it's kind of like the idea of what SQL Server does. When you click on Management Studio, all the names are always 3-part names so that you can go across and that kind of stuff. And that same kind of thing holds true. That same kind of stuff holds true for Snowflake. So you have to create the stage, and I can show that this stage is already built, but it's just that easy. I'm basically pointing to somewhere in Azure, and then I'm applying my token, and I just made a comment on where it was. So I can use the show stages, and I can bring back and I can see where that is, and you can see that that's actually in East US2. So once you create your stage, you can go out there and how can we put the data into Azure or Azure Blob? You can use what's the utility? Storage Explorer, the easy copy. So, so you can, whatever you want to do, that part of it is endless of the number of ways. I can't, you can put it in with ADF, you can put it in with anything. So it's just, you get the files there, that's something that you are going to have to manage. And once they get there, then you can start ingesting them. And I can start looking at what's out there. So I can look at the files that are in that stage. And you can see I have quite a few, right? And I have stuff, because you can't have a demo with Microsoft and SQL Server and all that without doing AdventureWorks, right? So we got AdventureWorks. But that's not as much fun as things like taxi data, because we want to show some sizes. And of course, because I have my, that's a test, we're going to do the same thing. I tested it and made sure everything worked. So I can also, with this stage, one note, just as I can make that stage pretty generic to where it just goes down to a folder, and then I don't give it more paths. You can be specific in your paths if you want when you create your stage, or you don't have to. If you don't, then is what I can do is from that stage, can everyone see that? Zoom in. You want me to zoom in? Okay. Sorry. So is what I can do is I could make this stage, all right, I could make this stage very specific or very general. I kind of like with the general, I'm going to this location, and in this location I have folders, one being New York Taxi and one being AdventureWorks, as you can kind of see down here. And I can then, from that stage, give more information to the stage so that it can go further define what I'm after. I also then have the ability to do patterns. I think that's the next part, right? And I'll zoom in on that. I can do patterns where I can say, I want the stuff from the taxi folder, and I want it looking like this. And this is showing me that I want to get the first, there are 3 files, because I think it's 8 million rows. 8 million rows per month, so it's broken up in 3 files because, again, it's faster to have smaller files that can go in than having one large file. So I broke them up into 3 files, and then I've also zipped them up. But I can get I can get very specific, and this is good to do because the copy command will basically take what you've done here. So you can kind of test it out, look at if that's the right files that you want, and then I can run that. The other piece that I need to do is I need to create file formats, and you can think of file formats as just a description of the way you want to ingest. It's just the metadata of, it's a CSV, it has headers, it's compressed, I want these to represent nulls, I want this to be the delimiter, all that kind of stuff. So you can think of it as metadata. Like stages, you can put them anywhere you want. I like to put them in a central database so I know where they are. They don't need to be there. If you're working at the database with very specific files, maybe you put them in those databases, right? But I've created some file formats, and I just make them general in name so that you can see. Like with a name, I'm just saying, let's zoom in. I'm just saying this one has a bar, it's zipped with gzip, and what's my thing for that? The first row has header, so skip it. Skip header, I think is what I put there. And as you can see, I just made another one that's a CSV file that is zipped up with gzip, and then the other one, you can just make those. You can also do those configuration changes at the time you're running the copy program. It's kind of convenient to have it so you can just point to the copy, or you can just point to that file format instead of having to define it each time. So, and yes, you can do CSV, JSON, Avro, ORC, Parquet, and XML.
Question, so if you change the schema name to something else, that would prevent people from having access to it? Because it's your schema name public.
Oh, to make my life easier, yes, for this demo. You can whitelist stuff, so you can do those pieces where you can whitelist and it's not. That's that's a standard practice, except in demos, right? So yes, you can do all that kind of restriction and whitelisting the things that have access to that folder. Yes. Good question.
And is that an Azure feature though?
There's a little bit of difference. There's some difference in a part of a feature that comes out of AWS, but you can do the whitelisting in all of them. But there's other pieces that you can do. Some of the other vendors have different pieces that you can add a little bit more.
Since there is no availability of the West Coast zone, does that mean that California folks or people on the West Coast will experience some slowness?
Am I allowed to say that you don't have to run? And there's another cloud. There's a different provider that actually has stuff in West. But if I'm not mistaken, it's moving to West pretty quick. So is it next month? Is that one? Okay. And again, you can think of it as it is your access to it. All that information's there. So unless you're moving data across. Okay. Any other questions that I haven't repeated? Sorry. It's all Unicode. I haven't tried that, but I mean, I think I have a file and it's got some of those languages in it. I haven't tested it, but it's all Unicode. There's the data types, and there's so many things to talk about, but the data types in Snowflake, and it will come at the very end, I'll talk about it being a problem, is the data types are basically, if you don't set anything, it will say number 380, which is huge, and you'll see that causes problems with a lot of the display tools. But their types are there's synonyms for a lot of things. Like if you do integer, it's number whatever. So it kind of changes back. But all the data, there's no non-Unicode data types, if I'm not mistaken. So they're all Unicode. So then they should be supported without a problem. I haven't done that piece of it. So, shall we load some data? So I'm going to create a database, different than the one sitting up here. And I'm going to create a table. And as you can see, data types, number 10, all this kind of stuff is pretty standard. But you can see the data types, I'm not using int, big int, all that kind of stuff. It's just number, and you can set the amount of size that you want with that. So I create a table. I didn't switch over the warehouse side. Sorry, it's in step 4, but it's not going to apply to this. I can list those files, and this is I was showing you can pick up the specific file. Now, if I zoom in, if I zoom into here, you can see that I'm basically going to load all the files that I have in that folder, and it comes down to 44 million rows. And of course, you don't do that stuff in a demo, right? Who would do that in a demo? Because, of course, if anyone noticed, for the people paying attention, I am running right now with an extra small. So I know there's all this big data stuff that we talk about and all these things that are fast. But so if I were to run that, let's just say theoretically in a demo with 44 million rows on an extra small, how long should that take? Long time? Shouldn't take that long. I think it's under 20 seconds. Let's see if everything's running right. Don't look at it too hard. I've had it come under 20. It'll, of course, at this time. There we go. Okay. So to prove that I'm not just saying that for fun, or I'm saying it for fun and it's true, here's that database. Here's that table. And as you can see right there, 44 million rows. That was on an extra small. So how many pennies did that even cost me to load that? Not very many. I don't know if I'm taking questions from you. Go. What's that? Oh, no. That's part of it. Okay. So of course we're really smart and we don't pay attention and we're like, oh man, those files are in there. If I run it again, what took my thunder. If I run it again, what's gonna happen? Anyone want to guess? Somebody's paying attention and it says all the files have already been loaded. That's kind of cool. It's kind of keeping track of that stuff. So first off, I loaded 44 million rows for what? $3 an hour divided by a minute. I don't even know. It's a nickel. Okay, so I loaded that in a nickel. So we're not doing AdventureWorks here. We're doing 44 million rows on a table.
So the next time it loads, would it do
Well, it's checking out the files that are there. If a new file shows up, yes, it will add that new file. Yes.
What if you're using daily loads and you have the same file name every day?
Well, but it understands it. I'm pretty sure that it understands that the files are different because the checksums are probably different.
So it does do a checksum.
I think so, because when you do list files, I thought it had that in there. I'm pretty sure that's right. Okay, yeah, so I wasn't 100%, but I was 99% sure. So that's pretty cool. So now 44 million rows. You would never, in a demo, query 44 million rows and aggregate it by something. Oh, it's already done. Yeah, so you can see, and let's ask, how many of the word that I won't say did I put on that? Okay, exactly. So, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to go through. You can cluster stuff, and what that means is that you can put data in order so that it can limit partitions a little bit faster. When we're doing things like this, it's not that big of a deal because it's reading the whole table, because that didn't restrict anything. When you cluster some stuff, which is just ordering things, it can limit partitions, because underneath the covers, a table is a bunch of what they call micro partitions. So they are a clustered column store in a certain amount of size that fits into one piece. That kind of makes sense? Okay? So I'm going to skip doing the cluster part, but I did want to show, because there was another demo. Because there was another demo I saw where they were, can I just read the file can I read it as an external table? There is external tables, and I'm not going to talk about that. But right here, you can see that I can read a portion of that file. Pretty quick, too. I don't have to wait for something to spin up and give me something. But in less than a couple seconds, and that's not even a second, right? I can see the first 100 rows from that file. Now, in full transparency, you do notice that I understand what the types are. I'm typing it. You didn't necessarily have to do that. I think I could have done select star and let it bring it back. So I can look at those files out there, even though that's been ingested.
Just like regular SQL, does it cause failure if there's a type mismatch?
Well, that's,
Would it cause a failure like SQL does?
if I can set something on, in this scenario, would there be a failure? So the question was, would there be a failure in this scenario? I'm not sure what would happen here because I'm just reading the data. If I'm typing and it's wrong, I would imagine it's going to.
SQL would cause failure if you were to select, like, let's say, 125 characters on a varchar 100.
I think it would do that if I've predefined it. If I just say varchar, did I say varchar for any of them and didn't give a size? And that's usually something you can do. Within the copy, I can tell it what it'll do. On failure, do this. There's things I can do. In this contrived example, I'm just looking at the data, so I would imagine it would blow up if something like that would happen, or not return it.
Let's say that you loaded, I don't know, 2 million records in, the third one had bad data, would you be charged for the fail?
Well, you're charged for all the time it runs. So if it ran, you got charged for it. The places that it doesn't, and I'm not sure in this example, if I run a query a second time, it'll always go look at, like if I go back here and look at, where was that one query I ran? This one? It's the same, is that the same query? No, that's on the cluster. That was on the cluster table. Hold on. If I run this query, it should come back super fast. And you see that? And it's kind of cheating because it actually didn't do the query. It actually went back and got metadata, and that query information was stored, so it just went back and got that metadata. So it understands that piece, and you can look at all that. The really cool thing is it's like Profiler on steroids, right? For all the people that, you can look at everything that you've done, right? And I can go in and look at the query plan. And I'm just trying to show 1,000 features, so hopefully I'm not going too crazy from that standpoint. If I come in here and look at profile, it should say query from results, and that's why it was super fast. And you can see when I showed that one with all the, this is where I was.
So since you're reading the .gz file and you're creating table and importing data, does that mean that if I was to SQL Server data warehouse to Snowflake, I'll be transporting it as GZ and then there'll be another
You're gonna-
duplication of data.
You're going to have to move it. You're going to have to move it. I mean, you can stuff. The other thing that we didn't talk about is you can do Kafka somehow and do it through Kafka, but Kafka has to write it, if I'm not mistaken, into internal store. So the interchange between a system that you're talking about and Snowflake is going to be a file.
Well, okay, and then Snowflake, when you create a table and when you port the data over, that's a second copy of what's in the file, in a way. Is that a true statement?
Yes?
Okay.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, Snowpipe, which is their own internal ingestion, so you can set up their own internal ingestion, if I'm not mistaken, it starts getting rid of the things that are on the file, if I'm not. But it's still a process that you can do yourself, right? Once you ingest it, you could have a process that goes back through and cleans up S3. But the big thing is you could just point it at your data lake, right? Because nowadays it seems like everyone's keeping all their files in a data lake. I can just point at a data lake and ingest those files in.
The question I have is when you did the import to the table,
Yes?
to me, that's like copying the data over from the file.
Yes?
Versus from what I heard, it was like a single copy was the concept that was provided by Snowflake.
Well, there's another concept that's outside of the copy, being a zero copy clone, which leads into where we will talk about that after. But that's, and yes. So to answer your question, is it a double copy? Yes, within the copy confines, right? When you copy it from the blob storage into Snowflake, at that point, yes, it's it's a little different, and you could get rid of this side, or if it's your data lake, that's just where it is. As you start to do stuff within Snowflake, no, there's not necessarily a copy.
So .gz file is more like a staging file till you get the data.
Well, that's the staging process, I would say, okay? Question? Nope. Okay. So let's,
By the way, so we support multiple compression algorithms, not just GZ.
yeah, I'm using that one as. So here's one of the things, like let's say the accounting department, like the gentleman was asking, I can sit here and make, if you go look at all the warehouses that I have right now, I just set up warehouses and I set them up with sizes. I can set how they expand from a cluster standpoint. But you can come in here and there's no cost to create warehouses. So I can create all these warehouses. So that should, if I refresh, I gotta actually select everything, sorry. Now run. So I can create all these warehouses. And this is just so I keep it a standard naming. And variables in Snowflake are done with a set command, and then you read them with a $ name. And as a practice, I do lowercase, I do uppercase, everything else. But I do lowercase. And you can, that's where the Oracle piece comes in if you're an Oracle person. Uppercase, and I would suggest doing uppercase. I think on one of the demos I'll show you why you, as a SQL Server person, it kind of grinded on me a little bit, but now it's just kind of the way that things are. Or it works better, and I'll show you why. So I can create all these warehouses now, and I can assign people who has rights to these warehouses. And then the nice piece to that is if I'm running as account admin, and I'll switch back, but as I'm running as account admin, I can go over and see that screen that I was talking about. Come on. I can come over here and see how things have been running and what's been going on that day and where was the cost. On this day, you can see all these things are running. So you can really manage it from that standpoint.
So Reeves, could you go back to how you assign access to users and roles, or do you have that?
And
You don't have it set up as
well, I mean, it's the same kind of, like I can grant, I could have swore that I grant, I'm running as sysadmin, not account admin, and I have all rights. It's your basic SQL statements. You grant usage, grant select on tables. It's all that same kind of stuff. In this context, I didn't want to deal with that, so yeah.
a gentleman asked a question earlier, and
So yeah, you can give all
the
that.
same question. So
Yeah.
I can
Oh.
restrict a user from seeing some data.
Oh, yes. And that's kind of, you were asking that question. I can come over here and I can see what privileges have been granted, right?
That's what I wanted to see.
Yeah. And I can add, and it's not from a UI perspective, but they're just SQL statements like grant usage on to, and you grant usage on roles. You create roles and you assign permissions based on roles.
Is this a good approach to creating data marts for your different business areas? Like, you create a data mart, or a warehouse,
Oh yeah.
and assign permissions to specific objects.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. And just to be clear, let's make sure the Snowflake guy likes this too, is Snowflake is not designed for transactional system. You do transactions, do not go there. Yeah, okay. That is the one thing that I haven't stressed, but this is a data warehouse. And you're going to see that with the zero copy clone and time travel, okay? So let's go there before we get too sidetracked. Any other questions? What do you mean by masked data? I'm not sure. I know that it's compressed or not compressed. I know that it's encrypted at rest and it's encrypted in all the communications. So but the thing is, to answer that question is, I want to say that's UI based, right? Right. Yeah, but from an object standpoint, I can make a secured view. I can make a secured view on that table and not give them access. So I like to say it's like SQL. Same kind of idea. I can make a view if I don't want to assign that. If you're talking in the UI to see it, it's a little bit different. And I think that's more of where he was going. But I'm saying it's a SQL thing. If you don't want to, you can assign permissions down. You can do secured views and hide it that way if you needed to, so depending on that use case. So, okay. Sure.
If I want to clone my production data and create one tasting order.
Okay, hold that. Hold that. We will get to that, I promise. So I tried to organize this stuff to make my life easier. I'm going to go to the SQL one. I'm going to do this one. I'll do these. Yeah, I'll open all four of them. Click on the right button. Okay. I will get to that one, I promise. Is this open in the right way? Right here? I'm just going to go through these. We're doing pretty good on time, but I want to make sure I get to zero copy clone and time travel. I was just showing some cool things. Here's array to string that allows me to pivot something, and I think SQL Server now does this as of 2016 or something like that, but it's kind of cool. A really cool feature that I don't think SQL Server yet does is this whole concept of last day, right? Yeah, the last day and I'll zoom in, I wanted to run it first. So this idea, can I get them both in there? Yeah, partially. There's this cool function, last day, and I'm just showing cool things, right? Last day, I don't have to sit here and go whatever to the month, trim it, and come back 3 milliseconds to get the last exact day. I can do that per year because the nice part is what happens on this day. And I can do it from whatever period, because as you can see, I'm doing that by year too, and I'm getting the last day of the year, which is pretty easy because we all know it's going to end in 12/31. But look at this one. This was 2/29. I didn't have to do any thinking. It just happens. That's kind of cool. I can do split. This is pretty cool. Now, this is just the cool section. We'll take where I can say, how many times do we split stuff? Trim, split, trim, 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 split. I can say, here, give me the one that's the fifth in. That's kind of cool. And how does that help? By looking at an IP address. Hey, for the people that know IP addresses, what's the third one all the time? It's easy to get at, these functions. So there's some pretty cool functions from that standpoint. I can do list ag, like when you're creating select statements, like you want to auto-generate all the select statements for a table, but you want them all to be in one line. This one's getting all the order keys, and it's lining up all the order keys over 1 million, but it's in one line. Kind of cool. And this part, okay, this is really cool, right? So how many times have we seen this? We're coming in, We got sales by country and region. But of course, why is the United States in its own region? Why don't we make it in one region, right? So we come in and we do a case statement. But we're doing this group by, right? So what do we have to do for that group by? We got to paste that in the group by, right? What a pain. Here we go. Ready? There's a thing called aliasing. Watch this. Done. Oh, but it didn't work. Why didn't it work? What did I do? I know that was supposed to be a punchline. Or did it work and I'm just not seeing it right? No, it worked. Thank you. It worked. I just didn't show you enough of the query. This is what we were seeing last time. See, you gotta believe. So now when I run it, United States gets compressed into one. And I didn't have to paste that stupid case statement within there, right? Again, nothing that awesome, but it's still kind of cool. Here's the other thing I think is, this is cool, not as cool as aliasing, but yeah, we see this, right? And don't we like how we have to do English day name and Spanish day name and French day name in our group by? That's kind of lame. Because I've been working for 20-some years in this field, and I've always been looking for this function. Give me any value, I don't care. And it now has come, and you can use it. And you can use this thing called any value, because I know it's going to be the same. And I don't have to put it in my group by. And if my German friends were here, I even threw in German for them. Oh, my word. There we go. And I didn't have to put them in the group by. So the any class, it's just kind of cool things like that. But that's all those pieces. Let's get into some of the other. Let's get into zero copy clone and time travel. So the concept of, let's see if I have a slide. It might make it a little.
Reeves, while you're bringing a slide up.
Yep.
You mentioned it's based on Oracle.
Well, I should say that, and here's a picture. I'll just go back to this. Here's a picture on that ingest, right? On what kind of happens from that standpoint. What I say is their data or their uses of the metadata within Snowflake is uppercase. And the reason I say use uppercase is because if you're not using uppercase and I use camel case and I don't put it in quotes, it uppercases it and sends it, and it is case sensitive. So as what will happen is you will, if it's not uppercased, like when you do the create statement, it will uppercase it if you didn't put it in quotes. I don't want to put it in quotes, because when I put it in quotes, now I'm saying it has to be that case, and if it's not that case, it's a pain. So my opinion is always keep it in that same case. Always uppercase everything. Because if you don't put it in quotes and you make it, it will uppercase it on the way in and out. It just makes it confusing from that standpoint. So now we're going to talk about time travel. We'll do that one first. And to get with time travel, you have to understand there's different types of tables. There's temporary, transient, and standard, I think it is, permanent. That dictates whether the table has time travel, and it dictates whether the table has fail-safe, which is if you delete it and your time travel days run out, fail-safe is where you can contact Snowflake and they can still get a hold of it for up to 7 days. So they're trying to save you from that standpoint. So that's good to know. Okay? And let's kind of talk about time travel under the covers real quick. See if this thing works. So you can think of a table as an association of a bunch of micropartitions. And as you can see, there's columns. All the columns from within that table are within the same micropartition, but they're cut up in smaller pieces. So if you were to update the table, and as you can see, that statement is going to update the table, the entire table, right? So one column. So you will create a new micropartition for that table, okay? Because one thing to understand is micropartitions are not updatable. Let me state that again. They are not updatable. This is why Snowflake is not a transactional system, right? Because you can see where this is going to go if you did that. But so in updating that, in running that update statement, you get all these new micropartitions, right? Because in this example, it did all of them because it was the entire table. And the table then moves over and now points to that. The metadata for the table moves over and now points to that. So now we have another update statement that just updates one row. That's going to update one micropartition wherever that row is, and the table is now going to, and this isn't physically, this is just to show you in the demo, that now that table will point at that group of micropartitions, right? Does that make sense? Okay. And that's why time travel is a big thing, and how much retention you want on tables, and why there's transient and temporary tables, because maybe you don't want to do that for specific tasks, right, to where it's important or not important. Okay, I think that was, yep. And then, oh, and here's the nice part, then I can drop the table. Oh, based on your time, based on your retention period, that stuff might not go away. That's why you can have costs associated that doesn't look like you have any tables, but you still have data, because that hasn't gone away, because what can you do? Undrop table and boom, it comes back. You can tell that to your friend that you know has done that once in production. Drop the table, oh no. But we just know people that have done that, because we would never have done that. So let's go through a demo. See what I got set up. Oh, I was going to show a cool function. Is this function? So I can cheat. And this HLL, I think it's hyper log or something. It's crazy. But so that table has 44 million rows. I'm doing a distinct count on every column in that 44 million rows. And it will finish before we go to lunch. Or no, no, it should finish pretty quick. It's pretty crazy. Done. It's within 1%, so it's not 100% accurate, but the ability to do that. And you see the note. Do I have the note in here? Well, again, extra small, so that's the other piece. But so we ran this 700 columns, just between friends, 9 billion rows, half a gig, large warehouse, 7 minutes, 20 seconds. Yeah, I'd like to see somebody do that somewhere else. Yes. Oh, sorry. Did I say gig? Sorry. Thank you for keeping me honest. It's all this pressure of you guys looking at me.
The question I had about the Oracle base is there a decode function?
No. It's more, is that case or is that coalesce?
Kind of.
Coalesce? There's coalesce.
It's kind
Yeah, there's a coalesce function.
of. Decode's better.
So let me open up my other set of, because now we're on time travel, right? We'll do time travel and zero copy clone. We'll open all of them. And of course they don't open in that. Sometimes they do. But the idea here is I'm going to set us to UTC time. What did it say? Oh, it's probably not highlighted correctly. Oh. So what's happening here is you see this error and you're thinking to yourself, it's not working. It does not like to run a comment as the last thing. So if you look in open history, you can see that it's actually running. But another little fun. So don't, even though that was nice for me to put there, don't put that there. So now I can get the current timestamp. It just everything ran. It just ran the last thing and it said, I didn't have SQL, so okay. So we got this, so now I got this timestamp. Let me just grab it. Okay. And that is right now. And let's just say I came in and was looking at volume discounts. Here's, I'm going to speed up a little bit because we're running out of time and I don't want to keep you here too long. It is the last session, so we don't have to get out if everyone's so excited. I can hear it, I can feel it. So let's say somebody asks you to update your volume discount, right? And of course you're saying they wanted to give you a 10% increase. So I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to give you 10%. And of course I'm not paying attention to the math. And oh no, that's not the right volume discount, because if I go back and look at it, the volume discount, it went the wrong direction. You're going to have to kind of just trust me because you're like, oh, that was the wrong direction. So the easiest thing I could do is just what's it look like before that statement. So I can come in here because I've been clicking around too fast. I can open history, and this is the statement that updated it, right? So I can come in here and go, yep, that was the statement that updated it. I can come in here and say, What's it look like before that query? And of course, don't highlight the last thing. Did I put one too many? Yeah. Again, all that pressure of you guys looking at me. I can see, oh, that's what it was supposed to be, right? And then I can go, hey, check this out. I can look at both of them. Oh, never mind, because that's a different query number. I have to pay attention to what I'm doing here. Do not mind that for right now, but come in here, paste that. Now, I can look at the before and after picture sitting right there, because that's pretty cool. Yeah, and that's where, whoops, you can see, oh, that was wrong. Wasn't supposed to do that. So with time travel, I can drop the date table, right? Because I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh, I want to drop the date table in AdventureWorks, but I'm thinking I'm in here, I can drop it and turn around, and it says doesn't exist because I got to get on the right database. AdventureWorks, right? And because I'm not prefacing with anything, oh, I meant to drop it from the do not do this thing. But now it's gone, right? But fear not. Oh, it's not there. Undrop. Whoops, and the case doesn't matter. It matters to me, but it doesn't matter. Now, all of a sudden, I've got my table back. But here, I can do this, and I don't have it on there, but I can drop databases and bring the whole database back. So you can do it at whatever level, schema, database, table, and this is the whole backup kind of thing, because you're not doing backups, that's your kind of backup.
How long do you have till you can undrop it?
Okay, that's your data retention period. In standard, you have 1 day. So you have 1 day in standard. In enterprise, you have up to 90 days. Okay, so I can get it to go out 90 days. I can do it for 90 days. And I can go in and query, because we're running out and I want to make sure I want to get to cloning. That's why you have to pay attention with that data retention time, right? Because if you have that data retention time and but then it can be expensive because you're doing, like let's say you do 100 updates on this table, you're keeping 100 microprotections. If you're doing it for the whole table, my word. So like in our ETL tables, we do a lot of temporary or transient table, I can't remember which one, but we don't want to track history on it, right? And you can turn the history down per table. So you can track it on certain tables. So, yeah. I'm saying yes, I've never tried that, but I'm pretty dang sure. Do we want to see? No, we'll take that to the end. You're making me nervous, but not. Yeah, no, I'm thinking that's correct because I'm curious where you're going to point to. That's my question, but I'm pretty sure, I'd bet a lot of money on it that it would truncate, because it's just another operation that happened, right? So, as you can see here, I'm going to create another table from customer 2. And I'm going to create it from the customer table, so I'm just going to clone it right within the same thing. And in this scenario, that happens and there's no data change, right? Boom, I have this new table. It is now customer 2. If I refresh, you can now see customer 2. I do a count on it. What do we got? 18,000 rows. My other table looks exactly the same. I find all the Smiths, and I decide to update their title to hello in customer 2. I look in customer 1. I'm just trying to go through this so we can get, if anyone wants me to slow down, that's fine. I go back and look at my original table. As you can see, null is still for title, right? But if I go back in here and run it, I see that it all has hello. So here's where one of you two was asking the question that I wanted to go to. Let me go to it with the next thing. So you got zero copy clone. And this is where I say, right here, I was ready for your question. What's that?
Okay, so I have cloned it, but in test environment, I don't want to expose customer name.
Well, you're just going to have to go through and you're going to have to clone it, and you're going to have to do some kind of, that's a process. It's not to say you can't do it.
So I want to mask customer name.
Well, you're going to make a new object. You're going to make that new object and you're going to have to clone it. you're still gonna have to deal with it. There's magic going on here, but there's some magic. I mean, if I'm cloning an object, I can't change that clone because the partition's not changeable. So if I change it, yes, I'm gonna have to do something else. But as what I'm thinking with here, let me go with here because we are close to being out of time.
There's some masking.
What's that?
There's some masking stuff coming in the roadmap.
I don't, when you say masking, I don't understand if you haven't given people access to that, I would say if you haven't given people access to the column, why do I care to mask it? I mean, it's a potato or potato. If I don't want them to see it, why do I even want to show up?
I want to generate test data without putting much effort. So cloning is good to generate the test data. But if I am not able to mask it, then it is not getting.
But here's my question to you. Why are you bringing those tables, why are you bringing those columns over that you want to mask?
Because all my test team need to do some testing, what development I have done.
But then you're,
The customer name is PII data, so I cannot actually follow this.
I mean, you're just going to have to deal with it from a SQL and given rights from that standpoint.
Here's what I was gonna say, is it looks like, the clone is a metadata alias.
Well, all you've created is metadata that points to the same micropartitions.
If you have two ways to reach the same data, and it's got that snapshot field where you updated the title in the two.
Well, let me show some. So the thing I want to talk about here is you can see that I can do it from, I can clone the production instance back to dev with that statement right there, right? And I can do it again for that statement in QA. And then if they do modify and they update and do whatever they want to do, they're moving on their own data. So you're able to say in your dev environment, you can read the same data that I'm reading in production. Minus the security stuff that you're talking about. When was the last time you ever ran off the same data that's in production? From it runs in dev on 10 rows. Yeah, it's great. Now we get to run it on the same data that's running in production. And I haven't made a single copy at this point. Now, if I modify it and update it, then all those micropartitions are going and you're going running on your own. So from that standpoint.
But everything you're changing in production, that's still.
Well, yeah, if you're changing the production database. So yes, everything you're changing in the production database is going with those forward. You're going with this forward. So it's managed at a different level. I kind of showed it, I thought I did a diagram. I'm a diagram guy, I like diagrams. So zero copy clone under the covers. Bing, you make another copy. I then update it. I'm updating the new table, the whole table. Now I'm pointing here. So now if I update one row or one piece, I'm sharing it in essence. I'm doing this as a diagram. It's not physical again. This goes this way, this goes that way. So you're able to do that.
So if you update the parent, the original, like production.
Yeah, if I say update the table name that's not in my, no, you're keeping your own set of information.
So production will keep moving and the clones will still see what they came in with.
The piece I wanted to get to, and I was trying to do too much. Okay, because I just want to show a ton of features. We have 2 minutes, and I want to just talk about this feature. So the cool thing is, have you heard of data sharing? Nobody else does this. So there's 2 ways I can do data sharing. Oh, I guess I should make this presenting, make my life a little easier, right? Okay, so there's this concept of data sharing. So what I can do is I can create if there's a non-Snowflake user, I can create a customer, and I can then share stuff with that customer. They can log into a website. It gives them a website look and feel just like mine, and I can go in there and manage it from what they can see, pull stuff in for them, and then give them rights, and they can go in and get it. Totally cool. You're paying for compute. They log in, you're doing all that stuff. The second piece, and I had a demo for this, and this takes a little while and a lot of hoping that I did everything right, is this concept of sharing with other Snowflake customers. So I can have my data. I can give them read-only access if they're a Snowflake customer. I can give them read access to my data, so there's no data that changes. They use their own compute. And in doing their own compute, they can have at it. Here's the nice part. I update it, they see it. So they see what I'm looking, And if you notice, when I was in Snowflake, they had the test data. That's exactly what they're doing. They've managed one, and they have it, and they've shared it with you, and you immediately get it. So it's the exact same kind of thing going on.
And even better, you get a rebate on the usage of the Snowflake account.
So the other piece I want to talk about, we're like 2 minutes over. If everyone wants to take off, there's this idea of database replication, and it's really just this diagram. The cool thing is I can replicate across different regions, and I can replicate across different providers. And the cool thing that this is it doesn't lock you into a database provider. If life were to get expensive on one, you can go to another. If you're purchased by some other company and they're all in Azure shop, no big deal. We'll move over to Azure, and you can move all your assets and all that stuff over to Azure. So it's pretty cool. I had a demo to do that, but everything's taken way too long. These are the items you can replicate. It's just like, if you ever heard of this product called SQL Server, when they do replication, what don't they get? Users and all this kind of stuff. Same kind of stuff that don't go across. That stuff's pretty standard. Every presentation has to talk about Power BI, right? It's slide 53 for people who are waiting and noting that need to talk about Power BI. A little bit of an issue, which is that you got to use the enterprise gateway to get back to a cloud provider. I talked to someone in the know, we'll just leave it at that, and they said it's on the roadmap, and it's not, it's on the roadmap. It's on the roadmap, and they are going to get it done pretty quick to where this is not going to have to happen, because you have to go back in, and thanks to my wife for putting that together, but I tasked her with it, because you have to put an enterprise gateway, so you're coming into that machine and coming back out, which is insane. So, but they're going to fix that and make it to where it's a cloud provider and you can go to it. Last issue before you leave, and I'm sorry it's taken forever. We're all in this big data world, right? And it's kind of like, can I say teenage stuff that doesn't happen but really happens? Everyone's talking about, you're the big data guy. How come none of the tools can deal with the numbers? And it's not a tool for Power BI, it's a tool for Tableau and Looker too. Snowflake's cool and has big numbers, 38 digits. That's pretty, I don't even know what it is. Really big. We'll just say it's a really big number. And when you start pulling those in, Power BI says no thank you. And it brings you back a blank. Because I put that number in each one. And I think, were you saying 26 or somewhere? That sounds like it could be the right number. Somebody said 26. There's some number that it just doesn't like. And it's because all these systems were never designed for numbers that big. Maybe the big data systems can handle that number. And I don't know, you guys might deal with a different world of the reporting tools to be able to use it. And with that, there might be better tools for it. I just know that those are issues and we're having to deal with those. We're using floating points, right? We're having to use floating points because, and then at the end of the day, 400 quadrillion, 253, do you really care about 253 when you're at that level? So maybe, but there's problems with that because now I can't say this was the number I had and this is the same number because now we're losing significance, right? That should be it. Sorry. I try to go fast. I want to show a ton of things. Yeah. But basically, Snowflake's pretty cool.